So here's my system and the listening space thereof. It's a very small space, about 3.5 by 3 and something meters. But when I moved out here, I had to put up with a smaller lounge space, but I was determined not to start downsizing for the sake of trying to fit into a small space and risk losing signal quality. As you can see, it's about half the room space, the rest is my little kitchenette at the back there. And when I moved out here, I brought with me a pair of Proact D15s, which were completely unsuitable for this space and sounded horrible. And I've also been doing other upgrades since I got here, 200, 202 to 282 plus 250 and so on. The speakers I got to replace the D15s were the ATC SCM19s, which I followed through with some reviews, and it was a choice between these and a pair of Harbith. I don't know which designation of Harbith, but it was a similar size, which I heard at my dealer some way away, as I'm out in the wilds of Spain. But he's an outlet rather than a shop, but he did give me a little demonstration with his name Atom, and the Harbith sounded better and the ATCs were, so I had to imagine what it was going to sound like once the ATCs or the Harbiths were attached to my system, which clearly is considerably more powerful than an Atom. So I did a mental juggling, read some reviews and decided on the ATC SCM19s, which have worked out really well, because you might suspect that they would overwhelm a room like this, but I never play anything that loud anyway, unless I've got the windows open to annoy the neighbours. And they're nice, really clear, very punchy, and I like them a lot. I've even got used to the strange industrial aesthetic of the covers, which, having had them on for some time, I've now actually got used to them. And it might sound strange, but I find them quite attractive in an odd sort of way. There you are, a bit peculiar, but you never know. SCM19s. The stacks, it used to be one 6-level stack plonked in the middle, but I found that interfered with the signal quality, so I've split it into two 3-level stacks. As you can see, the extra one that I needed, I got mail order, and I thought I got the veneer colour right, but clearly not. Never mind, it doesn't really notice when the lights are out, so there you go, it's functional. On the brains side, we've got the NAC 282, which I upgraded from a 202. Underneath that there's a name NDAC, and at the bottom an ND5XS, which I'm considering upgrading to an ND5XS2, because NDX5S, I can never remember which one they are without looking them up, to the second iteration, because I'm considering moving to Cobras and moving away from Tidal, that I've been having some problems with. Over on the muscle side, on the top we've got the NAP 250, which I've had upgraded to a DR, and it's on the top. I used to have it on the bottom, but there's very little space down there, and it used to run incredibly hot and sometimes cut out if I had it turned up loud, so I've rearranged that. And the stack in the middle, there's a high cap power supply unit, whose name we're not allowed to mention, so don't look. And on the bottom we've got the XP5XS power supply unit, which runs into the NDAC, which is also supplied by a mains cable, as well as the Burndy that runs from the power supply unit. Anybody who's has an NDAC or has had one knows that it needs those two inputs. As you can see, I put everything, all the spikes, into lots of little Audio Bliss dimples or cones to hold the spikes, which helps keep things nice and separate from the environment as much as possible. Onto a hard tile floor. The rat's nest at the back. Unfortunately, the stacks are too low to loop everything, and as you can see just hidden down there I've got the Wi-Fi unit. Its position is not that bizarre because everything is hardwired, so it doesn't rely on a signal from anywhere. And I've got cord interconnects. There's one chameleon in there, that blue one as you can see, and the rest are shorelines. Cord interconnects. Speaker cabling is cord Epic into the SCM19s, and there's my little NAPSC, also suspended on the floor on 3 little ball and socket feet, and as far away from the rest of the stuff as I can get it, as recommended. Stands, I used to have Quadraspire, those sort of wooden lean back stands. I bought them at the same time as the ATCs, but I found the ATCs are so heavy that they didn't last. They soon sort of, where all the screws were got split and wobbly, and I had to get rid of them. So I phoned up ATC and they recommended the Atacamas, which is good enough for me because they're fabulous speakers, so they ought to know what they're talking about, I thought. The real heavy duty ones, filled them about 3/4 of the way with sand as recommended to damp things down. And there we have it. There's my headphones, BMW PXs. All the boxes are separated from the IsoBlue levels. The first 2 levels I've done with little what do you call it, polyurethane feet, which seems to work very well. But on the top, they were no good, because especially on this one, because as you know the 250 is a heavy beast and they just squashed them flat immediately, so that was a waste of time. So what I did was I found on eBay, are we allowed to mention that? As long as I don't tell you what it was, I suppose. A couple of sets of 3 feet each, which are of a similar design to an old set of ball and cone separators that I'm using, as I mentioned, for the naps that I've had for years. Found them there, and basically they're made by a chap who turns them out, not a company, in his shed as far as I know. Basically he turns a piece of oak and then supplies the ball bearings with them. I'll just put the camera down for a second whilst I drag one out so you can see it. And I had these in today, and I'll just put them in place, and they do work very well. In fact, I recommend them. You can find them on eBay just by, you know, using your imagination what to look for, and something that looks like this, a sort of artificial nipple of Venus, isn't it? Suits you, sir. There's a steel ball and the socket that it goes in. Seems to work very well. The main effect is that the system loses a little bit of bottom end punch but gains a great deal of top end detail, so swings and roundabouts. I like the effect, so I'm keeping them. I'll just put that back before we carry on with the review. In she goes, being very careful, you don't want to lose those steel balls. Scrubbing around for them. And that's the system. Works very well for me, even though, as I say, it's such a small space. I do have a bigger space to listen to music to if I don't want to annoy the neighbours. I generally take my headphones with my mobile phone and my Tidal account outside into my outside listening room, where I have a selection of easy chairs. Happy days.